So now that Night 3 has finally finished off the Halloween event, it brought us 2 new towers, the Harvester and the Hallow Punk. And now that I've beaten Night 3 on both easy and hard mode, I can finally use these 2 towers, show off their stats, and give my own opinions on how good these towers actually are. But before we get into that, if you want to see more videos from me, please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let's get back to the review now. So the first tower I want to look at is the Hallow Punk, which is rewarded by beating easy mode on the event. But before I talk about it, I want to say something about both towers before heading into the review. Neither of these towers detect hiddens, so you either need an ace pilot to give hidden detection or another tower to kill hiddens. But both of these towers get flying detection, so I guess you can do something with that, I guess. Like, maybe for the fallen mode enemies, but like, that's it. But by the time flying enemies come anyway, they're already kind of underperforming, and it's not really worth it. You might as well just use, like, another actual flying detection tower. But anyways, back to the Hallow Punk. And right off the bat, you notice it only has 3 levels. This would be the first tower in TDS to go under the normal 4 levels for most of the towers in the game. And I think that's pretty interesting, as most towers either gain more levels, like level 5, or even level 6. They decided to make it 3 levels. Very interesting design choice. But anyways, let's move on to the review. This could be a quick one. We're gonna speed right through this. On level 0, it has a range of 18, a damage of 3, a fire rate of 5, and an explosive radius of 3.5 with a DPS of 0.59. On level 1, it has a range of 20, a damage of 6, a fire rate of 3.7, the same explosion radius, and a DPS of 1.59. On level 2, it has a range of 22.5, a damage of 25, the fire rate stays the same, and an explosion radius of 5 with a DPS of 6.65. On level 3, the final level, it has a range of 26, has 60 damage, the fire rate still doesn't change, and it has a final explosion radius of 5.5. Yeah, not that much. With the final DPS of 27.96. And what do I think of this tower? I think this tower is pretty good. For the early game, I think it's a pretty good tower. But towards the end of the game, it kind of falls short, as you can only place 12 of them, and compared to more high DPS towers, it doesn't do much. But it can do a couple other things. It can knock back towers, and on its final level, can burn enemies. And has a pretty cool explosion, not gonna lie. I like it. The red pumpkin. And with that, I think it's a pretty decent tower. About a C tier, maybe a low B tier, if you're generous, but it can only do so much for what it has. Now on to the Harvester. The Harvester is awarded by beating the hard mode of the event, and it is very different compared to the Hallow Punk. It doesn't have splash damage, kinda, but it has the ability to summon thorns that slow down enemies and damage enemies, which can also be boosted by the farm, making it longer but a little weaker. But I'll talk about that a little more later. For now, let's review its stats. On level 0, it has a range of 13, does 6 damage, has a fire rate of 1.2, has a DPS of 4.96, and can hit 2 enemies. What that is, it's piercing. Since it has a bow and arrow, kinda like the Archer, where it can hit multiple enemies while technically not being a splash damage tower. That's what that is. On level 1, it has a range of 15, does 8 damage, has the same fire rate, has a DPS of 6.62, and can still only hit 2 enemies. On level 2, it has the same range, does 10 damage, has a fire rate of 0.8, has a DPS of 11.65, and can now hit 3 enemies. On level 3, it still has the same range, does 20 damage, it keeps the same fire rate, and it has a DPS of 23.31, and it still hits 3 enemies. On level 4, it has a range of 17.5, does 30 damage, has a fire rate of 0.07, and has a DPS of 39.57, and still hits 3 enemies. On level 5, it has a range of 22.5, does 90 damage, has a fire rate of 1.5, and has a DPS of 59.68, and can hit 4 enemies. I know, crazy. Also, every level upgrades the thorns, so I'm just gonna show the difference in each level. and it also has a placement limit of 4. So my opinion on this tower is that it's a good support tower. The thorns are good for slowing down enemies and weakening massive hordes of enemies, and the tower itself does pretty good damage. The only problem is that it has a placement limit of 4, which I can still understand as getting 40 of these down. Spamming those thorns would probably be a little unfair. Kinda like Slasher, being able to get 40 of those guys would also be pretty unfair as well. But otherwise, it's a still great tower, definitely a B tier tower. If it had maybe a higher placement limit, it could be an A, but for now, it's a B. And yeah, that's my review and my opinion of these towers. They are both very good towers for how difficult it is to get them, and they don't feel underpowered, but they also don't feel overpowered. They're just right and balanced. They're good for supporting you, or good in the early game, but they're also not incredibly helpful when you're facing the final waves or the bosses, as using both towers combined, 4 Harvesters, 12 Hollow Punks, could not kill the Molten Boss, which is kind of sad, not gonna lie. Even the Slasher can kill the Molten Boss. But with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, join the Discord, and I will see you in another one. Bye!